Thanks, folks. So, thank you both for coming. Good to have you both here. The late edition of Christine. That's great. Which is very relevant for our Brigid Stay-related conversations.
Yes.
So I'm really glad to have you here. So, love that film, and I'm a fan of a lot of your work. So what I want to do first of all is, well, we'll start at the beginning. We'll talk about the genesis of this film and how it came about. How did you end up starting to make a film about this topic and these experiences?
A lot of our work, but not all our work, Gerry. That's
a lot of it.
Rather disturbing comment. I think the starting point of this came about kind of through anger. Really, we don't often have a starting point which is coming from a reaction to what was happening politically 6 years ago. But we were really angry about what was happening, and it did set in motion a kind of an anxiety through us and friends. I remember our daughter had her Italian, London-born friend coming over in tears, like, are we going to be thrown out of the country? So it was little stories like that which destabilised people's sense of belonging and our own, less because we felt we would be ejected from the country. These weren't unfounded anxieties, by the way. We all know how real they are. And so I guess in some ways it came out of that. I'm wanting to address that anxiety in some way, shape or form, or express it. And what would the logical conclusion of that anxiety be? Would be to imagine at least ourselves leaving the country and where would that take us? So yeah, I think that was an important platform from which to launch a kind of a political reaction to something without necessarily getting into party politics or mentioning the word Brexit. But it did make us feel about the impact that populism would have on emotionally your feeling about your sense of who you are, and the kind of an unpleasant anxiety, anxious feeling creeping in to everything. Yeah.
And we made another documentary called Further Beyond a number of years ago, and Further Beyond explores Joe's mother's story, Helen's story, in a different way. So it takes it from when she was born till the age of 19, when she had gone back to New York to visit her mother, having been separated from her since she was a baby. But to find her mother, to find the other members of her family, and we always felt that we wanted to come back to Helen's story and the period of time that she spent living in London with Joe's dad. And so both of these things seemed to make sense, the feelings that we had after Brexit and our own feelings about, well, we probably carried those feelings around for a long time, because we moved, as we say in the documentary, to the UK in 1987, and then we had a child here, and our sense of home and where we're from is very different to hers. And try as we might, over the 20 years of her life, every time we've brought her back to Ireland, she's always come back to the UK with a real sense of ambivalence about Dublin anyway, and the part of Dublin that we come from, which is in North Dublin, in a place called Finglas. She just thinks, well, it kind of sucks. It's really boring, there's nothing to do here, and I live in London. She went just
she's not swayed by Blanchardstown shopping centre.
She certainly is not. Or the Finglas village, she certainly isn't swayed by that. There was a moment during the Olympics where a friend of ours was involved in producing all the ceremonies, the opening ceremonies. So we were very, very lucky to be able to go to all the opening ceremonies. And I turned around at one point and Molly was sitting there with a Union Jack, and I thought, what are you waving that for? Can you put that away? And your
but you didn't
grandparents, no, we didn't. We kind of enjoyed it and took pictures and sent them home. Like, look at this. So we've, you struggle with things if you have these two senses of what home is, and they're very different, and then you've got to a child who's been born somewhere else, has a different accent to you. Her reference points are very different to ours, and what she thinks is home is different to the way we think about home. So we always knew that we probably wanted to explore that in some way. So Brexit became the launching point, the point that we jumped off from to revisit Helen's story and think about Molly and all the feelings we've carried around for years. Me and I had this crazy idea when we left the UK that maybe sometime might want to have a child, or will try and have a child, and if I do, I will go back to Ireland so that I can always say that they were born there. It's nonsense, and of course it made no sense when I eventually found myself pregnant, expecting a baby. Of course I wasn't going to go back to Ireland. What would that even mean? It's kind of a ridiculous notion, but maybe it's something I was hanging on to, and all those unresolved things that have been knocking around for years found there.
That's super interesting. Yeah. I think that's very relatable as well. Like, I find I have a young boy who was born in England and who's grown up as a English person, and it's a point of contention for his grandfather, for my dad. You know, yeah. So it is very interesting and a very relatable thing for anyone who's sort of a multi-generational immigrant, I suppose, of any background. But I want to ask you a little bit more about the background of this film, because I feel like the process of creating the feature tense overlaps somewhat with some of your other projects, and especially Rose Plays Julie, which we screened in 2021, I think. But this feels like there's an overlap in the process of creating this. I wondered if you'd talk about the creative process of putting it together and how those two projects sort of sit alongside each other. And I'm also curious because I know that when I talked to you both about Rose Plays Julie, you talked to me about a very specific creative process of going for these walks and creating a narrative in this way. And I wondered if that same process was a part of this one.
I don't think so. I mean, I think the difference being, I think with a fiction script, these are documents that you spend a period of time developing and writing, and the process of them is that they will result in a document that you will use to bring to in our case, a film board that they will, in one sense, to Screen Ireland, to take a view on, and other people like the BAI or RTE to take a view on to see if they're interested in coming on board. And so it's all about the text, that screenplay. Now, of course, it's more complicated than that. It's also about who you are and what they think about you and what you did previously and how that went and so forth. So these become, on the surface of it at least, something cold and objective about a script, but they're also very emotional decisions that other people are making in boardrooms that you know nothing about. So, you know. Whereas this is very liberating in that you apply with an outline of an idea, and the funding is a grant, it's not a loan. So the loan is to be paid back. No little or no films that are ever made certainly ever pay back their loan, because you need to be very successful in order to pay back your loan. But it's a cultural investment. But I think they wrap it up. Just, you never know, that something might be a huge hit. You never know. And it's true, you never know, but 1 in 1,000 films are. But it's about how it's investing in cultural product, I guess. These projects are the walking to do, how the script is done by going out with a camera, developing, recording images, coming back, talking about them, writing about them, and trying to develop narratives around them. It's a little bit like, as David Lynch said, where ideas come from. He finds himself sitting in a room, and a door will open and something will float in, like a little tiny satellite of something, and then something else will come in and attach itself to it, and it'll either grow or not grow. So we don't know where they come from, but it's you follow your nose, or you're following like Sherlock Holmes, you're following leads, and you're hoping that other things will attach themselves to that lead. And I think in the act of going out with the camera and talking to people and being in actual real places ideas start to accrue and develop. And although we enjoy writing, this process is a very satisfying one, but it would be utterly laughed at if you were to go to a screen agency and say, we have an idea, and it's this idea, and we want you to invest in this rough idea. Even Mike Lee really struggles to get film financing with that. And so it's kind of, sadly, a very uncreative process through which films often get made, and they're brutally quick. So you might spend 2, 3, 4 years developing a script. If you're lucky, you'll have 5 weeks to get to film them. It's savage, really. It's amazing anything ever comes together. And then you have this edit process. But we found these films to be very creatively satisfying and somewhat reminiscent of our theatre work. And so they're deeply, we kind of understand that process and wish that was a more understood process. But the Arts Council in Ireland, to their credit, are quite visionary and brave compared to the Arts Council England in supporting these kind of initiatives. And their hit rate for interesting films over the years with like real art and film projects is extraordinary.
Yeah, incredible.
I don't know if I answered your question there, but
Yeah.
whatever.
Yes, I think that there's a much stronger relationship in these films to the way we used to make our live work. I'm just looking at a gentleman in the audience, Alan Reid, who actually was a lecturer of ours in Dartington, and is all to blame for the journey we went and after we left. But it was a really amazing place, and it had its own kind of ethos and its approach to thinking about art and how we make art, and thinking about structure and storytelling and how things are put together, and to really kind of open it up and turn it inside out. So he really is to blame. Like why, when we first came back from, when we first started to make work after live work, theatre work that we used to tour after we went to Dartington, there was a really good friend of ours, and he grew up across the road from me in Finglas, and his mother used to say, why can't you just make a big lump of a play? Like that devised work that's structured differently. So I guess film, if we're going back to Rosebud's Julie, the kind of the storytelling ultimately on paper, I'm not saying that it needs to be more conventional, but it helps if people can sit down and read a lump of a script and see the arc of the character. And so there's that story, which is the standing document, and then there's the storytelling, how you're going to then take that off the page and translate it into images on the screen. So there's a difference there. When you get the kind of the freedom to make a film like Future Tense, you can think about structure in a very different way, and that would be at the heart of our process, trying to figure out how we're going to pull these things together, which does bear a much stronger relationship to the live work we used to make many moons ago.
That's really interesting to think about, because I do see a relationship between this work and, well, actually all of your other work. It definitely fits into the canon of a Desperate Optimists production, I suppose, in a way. You talk the way that you open this film is very interesting, because you kind of put your cards on the table and say, actually, should we let people know that this isn't how it was meant to be? So I wondered if we would talk a little bit about how it was meant to be and how the project sort of developed or responded to the conditions of, pandemics and lockdowns and people not being available and stuff.
Yeah, all of that was true. We did have people lined up. Alan from this first film, and then Owen Fuere, who we've known for many years and I think is a wonderful actor. And so, the pandemic threw that. But then in hindsight, and you don't know that before you begin, it would be really ridiculous to have two actors. I don't know if people agree with this, but it would be very strange to have two actors playing us in this way, with it being much more personal than part one, which is further beyond. And it's one of those things that happens from time to time when an accident throws something in this direction, and this really is what it should have been all along, and we kind of were lucky and got a break. I mean, would we have spotted it when they came over, recorded, put it in the timeline, and realised that despite how good they are, it just isn't right, and we would have had to step in? I don't know if we're, who knows. But what happened is that I think this accident of them not being able to travel over at that time meant that we would have to do it. But we did have 3 goes. That was the 3rd go. And the first go, well, it's a little bit like Dolly the Sheep. When Dolly the Sheep was unveiled, I think Dolly the Sheep, at the Roslin Institute, when they finally unveiled Dolly the Sheep, was number 313 or something like that. So you can imagine Dolly the Sheep number 57 or something like that would have been like hideous to watch. You know what I mean? Something out of a Cronenberg film. Our first attempt was not pretty, and we were like, "Oh, we really are bad," and we couldn't look at it for about a year. We said it was just like it was evil. We had to kind of lock it in a box or something.
Painted and decorated our flat.
Yeah, we just said okay, but it needs a few goes in order to do it right. Because then you realise, because we work with actors quite a lot, you think that's not easy in front of a camera. Yeah. That's tough.
Yeah. And we did, with Further Beyond, we worked with Alan Howley, who's an actor that we worked with on numerous occasions. He was in Roosevelt's Judy, a small part. He's also been in some of our live work from years ago. And we worked with Denise Goff, who's a pretty stellar actor. And actually, when we wrote Further Beyond, we know the way Alan can perform as opposed to act, and it was very much a piece of work to be performed, not to be acted. And we kind of could hear Alan performing, and the asides and the off the script stuff, and although it was scripted, we knew that he could really do that. And Denise is pretty brilliant. And we had performed before, but we really didn't want to do it. And it was just a very, very painful, very, very painful process. But when we actually got to this on the 3rd go, I did sit in our bedroom the morning that we were filming and put on the headphones and listened to Denise and thought, okay, I've got to try and figure out how exactly does she do this, and try and think about that. So, yes, to give myself some kind of help through, this task that we didn't want to do, just to get through it.
That's such an interesting turn of events, the way it's worked out like that. Because now that you do say it, maybe that would have been utterly ridiculous to have other people in it, but not out of context for a Desperate Optimists.
But it wasn't verbatim, so we also went back to the project. Once we knew we were going to do it, we it's not that we started from the beginning, but we kind of had to. And then elements came in that weren't in the original, that would never have been in the version that Alwyn and Alan would have done, particularly some of the stuff with Molly. So it also opened up a space for us to think about it differently. Once we committed to the fact that we would need to do it, if we were ever going to get the goddamn thing finished, it just opened up a little bit of space as well. And it's the kind of structure that can be quite flexible.
Yeah, that's very interesting. In a moment, I'm going to open up to questions from all of you, if you have any. So this is your 5-minute warning to think of a brilliant question to ask Christine and Joe. In the meantime, while all that percolates, I want to talk about Rose, the Rose of this film. There's maybe a separate thing to talk about how there's a lot of names that are sort of recurring in your work, But I want to talk about Rose Dugdale, because I think that you were telling me before you've progressed on that project.
Yeah, we did film it. We shot it in November and December. We did this other film before this. We call it part one or a companion piece. You don't have to watch one to watch the other. But we tracked these 2 characters. One which is Helen, a slightly earlier, more detailed journey, and the other person was Ambrosio O'Higgins, this Irishman who was born in the early 1700s, and went on a journey from Ireland and Sligo in Ballinary to a townland, to eventually Cadiz, and then Santiago, where he became quite an important man, and his son became the independent leader of, or he liberated Chile from the Spanish. So we followed his journey. And we kind of felt it's kind of an interesting, we muse on the biopic nature of that with no real intention. But as we began researching this Rose Dugdale story, we thought that would be an interesting film to see. And we began the process of writing that screenplay. And as it gathered, sometimes you might get to page 20, 30, 40 and think, it's not really going to go any further than this. But we felt actually this was very strong and very much of the moment. But we didn't actually shoot it. And Imogen Poots, I don't know if people know Imogen Poots, but Imogen Poots plays Rose Dugdale. So we're just beginning the editing process. So it's kind of very strange to have gone through this process and use this as a very elaborate way to research a potential screenplay. But things often are like that. One idea is never really fully independent from another idea. Things are always connected, and if you can just develop this particular strand, then it could set itself off. It may not have, but I think it has. Well, it hasn't come out as anything yet. It's too early to tell. But I think we haven't fucked up. I think, but I don't know. But anyway, we shot it, and she's great, and the other cast like Tom Bon Lawlor and John Kavanagh and so forth are fantastic. So that's been very interesting to see how that would evolve and what it became in terms of its grander themes to do with the politics of the time, the temper of those times. Again, the anger she felt, or her radicalization, and what she ended up doing. It's like Ulrike Meinhof in a way, or some other of those characters in the 60s and 70s, where somebody starts here and then reach a tipping point where it just goes in the wrong direction. But it's interesting nonetheless to watch somebody go on that journey, where they start off being incredibly intelligent, very enlightened, incredibly generous, and then these very hard to define moments when they suddenly find themselves priming bombs in milk churns and throwing them out of helicopters. Interesting.
I suppose that's like the big question then that you kind of touch upon there. The grand question really to ask you two about your work is the way that it all connects. And I've been sort of dancing around that a little bit, but the names that connect the characters in your films and everything, and the way that this project sort of overlaps from further beyond and through Rose Plays Julie and this Rose Dugdale thing.
I guess the kind of characters that you're attracted to or drawn to, and there's certain themes in our work that we go back to again and again. And so our interest in Rose Dugdale has a lot to do with the fact that she felt that she didn't belong and was looking to reinvent herself or to find a place where she could fit and where she could belong. And although I think she had a very happy childhood growing up in Axminster and Devon, between there and London, she obviously from a young age must have felt like a fish out of water, that she didn't belong inside her family, which must have been a very, in a deep way, lonely and sad place to find yourself. I love these people, but at the same time, I can't stand this world that I am a part of, and wanting to find a way out of that and to quite literally reinvent yourself. And along the way, using performance, she performed. I mean, we focus in our feature film on the raid at Rusper House, but when she was involved in this first campaign in Northern Ireland, where they dropped the milk churns on in the RUC base in Strabane, she also took on a character, an identity, wore costumes, wigs. When she ended up in London in a squash and gave away all her money, her inheritance, her fortune, she took on a persona of a real Londoner, and she has taken on a real Irish persona in Ireland and has got the Irish brogue, and so she's just somebody like a comedian-like figure who has that kind of shift in how she presents herself and her identity. And I guess we have always been drawn to those kinds of characters in different ways. And so, Rose in Rose Plays Julie is adopted and always wonders about this other version of herself, the life that wasn't lived. Mr. John in our film Mr. John, Gerry goes to Singapore when his brother dies and almost steps into his dead brother's shoes to help his sister-in-law who he's never met before and to get away from his troubles at home in his own family life. And Helen in our first film, our first feature film, she's come out of the care system. She doesn't even really know what it means to be part of a family and finds herself getting involved in a police reconstruction of a missing, presumed dead teenage girl, and then kind of finds her way into that girl's family's life to experience what it's like to be part of a family for the first time. So we've always been drawn to characters who are looking for something to fit in or to discover who they are, to unlock it, to unlock the door to who they might be or to come to terms with something about their past. And so it's no surprise, I guess, that early on in the process with the Future Tense, Joe came across Rose Dugdale through working on research around Rusper House. And although we knew about the general, Martin Cahill, the drug baron in Ireland, who also orchestrated a raid on Rusper House, and John Boorman made a film about him called The General. I didn't know that before Martin Cahill ever stepped foot inside Rusper House, Rose Dugdale had orchestrated this massive raid on Rusper House. And when they eventually, also raided Rusper House, it was on its way to becoming a museum, which it is now, not a family home. And the audacity of what she did, and then the story around it. Part of me thought, we're getting back to St. Brigid's Day, why was John Boorman attracted to Martin Cahill and not Rose Dugdale? Because her story is more interesting, rather than this kind of naff, lovable rogue character. And it's not surprising to me that the female character gets shoved to one side to make room for this kind of